All right, let's jump straight into this explainer and break down the staggering cultural and tactical transformation of the Indian Test cricket team under Virat Kohli. You know, for decades, Indian cricket had a very specific reputation. They were phenomenally talented, especially at home, but when they traveled abroad to face the real heavyweights of the game, they were often perceived as polite, passive, and honestly sometimes easily bullied. And remember, we are talking about Test cricket here, the absolute most grueling format of the sport where a single match lasts for 5 physically agonizing days. You literally cannot hide in Test cricket. But under Virat Kohli, that passive narrative was completely incinerated.
So before we really get into the weeds here, we've got to ask ourselves how a historically passive team suddenly became this fiercely aggressive force on the global stage. Historically, opposing teams knew they could bully India away from home without facing any real retaliation. They were basically the nice guys of world cricket. So how does one guy fundamentally change the psychological makeup of an entire sporting nation? Well, the answer isn't just about him scoring incredible amounts of runs. It's about a complete cultural overhaul, right from the dressing room to the field.
To figure out exactly how he pulled this off, we're going to dissect his leadership through 5 key pillars: the new India mindset, his contrast with MS Dhoni, the new fitness religion he instilled, the terrifying pace battery he built, and finally, the hard data behind his legacy of dominance.
Okay, pillar number 1, the new India mindset. This is the absolute catalyst for all of it, the mental shift that turned an entire squad into an unapologetic, in-your-face collective.
I absolutely love this assessment from former Australian coach Greg Chappell. He literally called Kohli the most Australian non-Australian cricketer of all time. And if you know cricket, you know that is basically the ultimate compliment. It meant he possessed that legendary, ruthless Aussie grit. Kohli was a player who absolutely thrived on conflict. Even Australian fast-bowling legend Mitchell Johnson pointed out that Kohli was this rare Indian player who was truly up for the fight, never once backing down from verbal or physical intimidation. And this aggressively taking the game on attitude, it created a massive ripple effect, entirely rubbing off on teammates who previously might have just stayed quiet.
You can trace this whole attitude shift right back to a pivotal moment in Adelaide in 2014. Stepping in as captain for the very first time, Kohli gets into this fierce battle with Mitchell Johnson and the Australians. It's day 5 of a test match facing a massive run target, and traditionally, teams just play it safe and block the ball to secure a draw. But Kohli, he explicitly told his men to go chase down the win, actively risking a loss to do it. He absolutely refused to play for a draw. He demanded tough, winning cricket, setting the tone that would eventually lead them to a staggering 5-year reign as the undisputed #1 test team in the world.
Which brings us to pillar 2, Dhoni versus Kohli. Because to really appreciate this new era, we have to contrast it directly with his legendary predecessor, MS Dhoni. It's honestly a night and day difference. You've got Dhoni's calm, pragmatic approach versus Kohli's win-at-all-costs aggression. Dhoni was famously Captain Cool, often utilizing a defensive mindset away from home, totally fine with grabbing a draw to save a match, and generally preferring the safety of 4 specialist bowlers. But Kohli was the aggressive warrior. He despised settling for a draw, and to constantly push for a win, he demanded the firepower of 5 specialist bowlers. Now, in cricket, playing an extra bowler means sacrificing a batter, which heavily increases your risk of collapsing and losing. But Kohli was perfectly willing to take that massive gamble just to guarantee his team had enough firepower to take all 20 opposition wickets.
And man, he introduced absolute ruthlessness into team selection. Unlike Dhoni, who loved sticking with winning combinations even when guys were out of form, Kohli heavily rotated the starting lineup. He had zero problem dropping established superstars if they weren't performing. It was kind of jarring for fans at first, but it proved nobody was safe under his regime. He turned the squad into a team of warriors who mirrored his exact intensity for all 5 days of a test. He stood up to the opposition, he stood up to the media, and he made sure his team never took a single step backward.
Moving right along to pillar 3, the fitness religion. Because you can't have that aggressive mindset without the physical engine to back it up.
Just listen to strength coach Shankar Basu's take here. He elevates Kohli from a cricketing great to an Olympic-level athlete, putting him in the exact same bracket as guys like Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, and Usain Bolt. To grasp why this was such a game-changer, look at the previous state of Indian cricket. Before Kohli, the players were supremely skilled, for sure, but they weren't exactly known as elite, chiseled athletes. Kohli realized that to beat teams like Australia and England in their own backyards, skill alone wasn't cutting it. India had to outwork and outlast them physically. So he demanded that LeBron-level physical standard from literally everyone around him.
And this wasn't just blind, tough guy, hard work. It was a highly scientific, cultural reset. He basically made the yo-yo test completely non-negotiable for team selection. And if you don't know what the yo-yo test is, it's this grueling, multi-stage aerobic running test that pushes you to absolute sheer exhaustion. Making this mandatory sent shockwaves through the sport. It didn't matter how talented you were with the bat or ball, if you didn't pass the fitness test, you didn't play. By leading by example with that extreme discipline, Kohli gave the Indian team the immense stamina they desperately needed for those brutal overseas conditions.
All that extra stamina feeds perfectly into Pillar 4, building a pace battery. This was hands down Kohli's greatest tactical weapon. Under Kohli, the Indian team completely tossed out their traditional playbook. Historically, India relied heavily on spin bowlers who thrived on India's naturally dusty home pitches. But that strategy famously failed when they went abroad. So Kohli changed the math. He unleashed a rotation of elite fast bowlers, a true pace battery, featuring guys like Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Shami, Umesh Yadav, and Ishant Sharma. He gave them one job: take 20 wickets in any condition, anywhere in the world, completely taking the pitch out of the equation.
And that gave breath to this iconic locker room battle cry coined by coach Ravi Shastri: "To hell with the pitch." Actually, in Hindi, it was "Bhad mein gya pitch." In cricket, the pitch, that 22-yard dirt strip, usually dictates exactly how the game is played and who has the upper hand. But Kohli's pace battery? They just didn't care. They were so supremely conditioned that they defied their environment, taking 20 wickets through sheer force and skill. For the first time, Indian seamers were striking genuine terror into batting lineups across the globe.
Which brings us to our final pillar, number 5, a legacy of dominance. Let's dig into the hard numbers to see exactly how this whole philosophy translated into unprecedented, historic results.
Out of 68 matches in charge, Kohli led his team to 40 victories. That is a staggering win percentage of nearly 59%. Now, if you're an American sports fan, 60% might just sound good, not historically massive. But you've got to remember, in Test cricket, draws are incredibly common because games last 5 whole days, and weather or stubborn defensive batting can easily ruin a result. So, winning close to 60% of Test matches is an absolute astronomical achievement. It proved his confrontational style was highly effective. He literally turned India into an inviolable fortress at home, winning all 11 home series he captained.
That's 40 overall Test wins as captain. That number places him in the ultra-elite company of true global legends. We're talking about leaders like Australia's Steve Waugh, Ricky Ponting, and South Africa's Graham Smith. He didn't just win, he dominated. I mean, 7 of India's top 10 Test victories by runs margin happened directly under his leadership.
And check out this massive number, 591. That's how many wickets his fast bowlers took while he was at the helm. Like we talked about, they were the true engine of his overseas conquests. They were striking gold every 52 balls, meaning a top-tier batsman was getting out every 8.5 overs. That level of sheer lethality and constant pressure rivaled the absolute greatest Australian bowling attacks of the early 2000s. He also secured 7 incredible wins in SENA countries, which stands for South Africa, England, New Zealand, and Australia. These are notoriously hostile territories for visiting teams, full of fast, bouncy green pitches that used to absolutely terrify Indian batsmen and render their spin bowlers useless. But Kohli shattered those historical barriers. Most notably, he became the very first Indian captain to ever lead his team to a Test Series victory in Australia during that monumental 2018-2019 tour. So, as we wrap this up, it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to ponder. We aren't just looking at a player who scored a mountain of runs and broke a few records. We are looking at a captain who fundamentally rebuilt the underlying DNA of Indian cricket from the inside out. He made them fitter, he made them faster, and he made them utterly fearless. Will we ever see another leader in the modern game single-handedly forge a team in his own fiery image with that kind of resounding success? It's a legacy that is absolutely going to define the sport for generations. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.
All right.